Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to this new tutorial. I have planned to do this for a while, but found it a bit difficult to find the right way to explain it. But I eventually thought like, well, just give it a try. So I hope it is understandable and you find it useful. The idea of Rotator, at least as far as I know, stems from the John Bowen Solaris. That's where I've encountered it for the first time. Basically, you have 4 oscillators and you rotate between them. You just oscillate 1, 2, 3, 4, and then start all over again in a circular movement. This concept has been taken to the next level by this little beauty called the Vector Synth, where, yeah, look at these animations. There is a dot moving around, and even the dot itself is orbited by another dot. And this entire thing is in an XY matrix, and in each corner there is an oscillator. And when the closer you move to the corner, the louder the respective oscillator gets. So this entire thing is just blending between the oscillators. So how can we do this in Bitwig? So let's get the basic setup. Actually start without this mixer. We have a wavetable oscillator. This is very basic. Take it. We need 4 oscillators. Then we should select some different waveforms for each of the oscillators so that we can actually hear the difference. Maybe this one is completely random, what I select here, just kind of looking at the waveform and take what I think looks pretty. Okay, and now when you connect the first oscillators, hold down the Option key, that it creates a mixer for us, and then just connect the subsequent oscillators and turn down the volume. So the volume will be controlled by our XY modulators. Now, in here, ironically in display, we have this XY matrix, which we could actually use, but there are only 2 modulation outs, which is a bit limiting, or it would make it a bit more complex. But in here we have the perfect tool, which is already set up the way we need it to be, which is the Vector 4. And it has 4 modulators out, which we now just can connect to the volume of the respective oscillators. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So done, and now entered the value, which is 1. So we have the same for each oscillator. And this is already a basic setup of a Vector Synth. But you hear that we have a little problem in between, or especially here in the center. The volume drops significantly. And the reason for that is that we are controlling a decibel scale in a linear way, which means an exponential scale, but we are fading linearly. But we can counter that when you see this little box here that lets us choose different modes how modulation is applied. And you can see we have here an exponential and also in a logarithmic curve that we can apply to it. And this will actually cancel this exponential scale. And we can see in a minute. Now we have equally perceived volume throughout, and this is what we need. Okay, so now that we have the basic setup, we need to introduce our modulators. Well, we want to create a rotary movement here. And what we need for that is, of course, first an LFO. And when I tried this the first time, I took 2 LFOs, synchronized them to each other, and it was a rather complex construct. But then I found out that these guys are stereo oscillators, or oscillators, low frequency oscillators. And we can use this to our advantage. Okay, first, we can modulate these 2 axes. Well, this is the the y-axis, switch it to bipolar. And now this is not a circular movement because we have triangle selected. Now, a sine wave is a linear display of a circular movement, at least in one axis, in the y-axis in this case. This is just us looking from this side at a circular, and we just see how the radius is going up and down because we don't see the movement that it makes in the x-axis. Now we also need to look at it from below, where we get the x-axis movement, and mathematically speaking, this is the cosine, which is also 90 degrees rotated to the sine. And we can control the phase of the left and right right channel respectively. And if I enter 90 degrees, or actually minus 90, but just plus 90, minus 90 controls the direction I want to go in clockwise. That's why I start with minus 90. If we now apply this modulation to the x-axis, we should get a circular movement. Now, first we need to, well, kind of remove that. And we need to have access to the left and right modulations independently. And we can do that, we can access that by introducing or grabbing a stereo split, which now delivers us the signal for the left and the right channel separately. Now grab a modulation out, duplicate it, and connect the left and right channel respectively. Now the first one we want to apply to the y-axis, and the second one to the x-axis. And now we can see we already have pretty much our circle movement. Just get the precise value, enter the precise value. Now we have our primitive bare bone rotator. Let's switch that to hertz. Nice. Yeah, this is also perfectly polyphonic. Well, if you switch to multiple voices, it's a bit difficult to hear, but it is. It is polyphonic. Let's go back to monophonic for now. But there are a few things we want to control here. One being, of course, the amplitude or the radius of our rotator, which we can achieve by just adding an attenuator. Now we can control how much we want to rotate, or how close we want to go to single out a specific oscillator. And another thing here is the speed of the oscillator. I'm not very happy with this, the way they have implemented it here, but there's always a workaround in Bitwig, and so we're going to do that and create actually a full range LFO, which goes from 0 hertz to 32,000 hertz in one go, and you don't have to switch between hertz and kilohertz. Okay, let me grab. So we need a value module, and we need a modulator out. Connect these two and apply modulate the full range. Now the problem is, as you can hear, even in the lowest, we are already almost in audio rate modulation. But we can change that when we go to phase and grab ourselves a bend. This allows us to control how the change in this value is applied to the modulator, and basically almost until the mid position, it will stay very, 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 very low or close to 0. And now when I open this value knob, you can see that I can, yeah, we start almost at and we have the full range available. Also, I think it feels more natural because frequency is also kind of perceived, in quotes, exponentially. Every octave is a doubling of the frequency. So it makes more sense to have it that way instead of linear. But I still think I want a bit more granular, a better control in the low range. So I just duplicate the bend, concatenate it, apply a bit less. Yeah, that's the way I like it. So what else? I mean, at the moment, whenever we hit the note, we start at the same phase. We maybe don't want that, so we could opt to let it run free, or we can also kind of control the start position by adding a shift module, set the modulation to 100%, and then just drag the knob here. Now every note just starts wherever you want to. So, but this is only one kind of rotator. Maybe, well, if... Let's stop it real quick here. Around here. So, well, the oscillator 3 here would be basically playing solo if this dot were in the corner. But we never reached that because this is the maximum amplitude and we rotate around. So this makes it feel a bit softer than if you would really hardcore go out into the corners. But it might not always be what we want. So how do we get a square movement? Well, the first part, getting a square, is easy. We just have to switch to triangle. And when we now start rotating, we have our square. But the square is not in the right angle. We would have to rotate it 45 degrees. And believe me, I almost despaired when I tried to figure out how to do this. How do I rotate this square? I looked up some fancy math and eventually, when I almost gave up, something popped into my mind. And this is that we have mid and side signal here. And we're going to use that. Actually, let's duplicate this thing. And these two modulators, let's hook them up to the mid and side signal instead. Now, of course, we need a way to switch back and forth between them. So let's grab a split, connect the second to the second output, and grab a button to switch between the outputs. Yep, of course, they want to be wired up as well. We need to modulate. Yeah, that's the wrong direction. I want to clockwise. Okay, and you can see this is 45 degrees rotated. Okay, we need to do for 1, and here -1. And also we can switch, no, not quite. Now we will just change the orientation. We also need to change the waveform back to sine. So let's grab an I/O, another modulator out, connect it, wire it up, go back to sine wave. Now just drag until you see the waveform you want, which is the triangle. Nice. Now we can switch back and forth. However, as you can see, we still don't reach the corner. This is because the radius of the modulation is still the same. We are now in a square movement, but this is still the maximum. It's still the radius from before. I hope this makes sense. We can easily correct that. I did not do the math on it or anything. It just added gain knob. And I figured out if you enter a value of, come on, amplify it by 2.8 decibels, that gets you perfectly into the corner. And now everything is as expected. So, to make it a bit more interesting when we are playing it, it would probably be nice to control the speed of the rotation with, let's say, something like channel pressure. And modulate the speed. So now when I hit the note, yeah. But now in the let's go back to this center. We have seen here this little sub rotator, which is a nice little thing, and let's see if we can replicate this. So basically we have this here, and then we want the tiny little orbiter around, circling around. And it's actually much simpler than it looks like. We can just grab our entire construct here, duplicate it, and now let's turn it off for a second. And now it's just wire up these modulators in the exact same way. So this is just our rotator 1 and rotator 2. They're both equal, but we can use this one as a sub-rotator when we just attenuate here a little bit. Maybe increase the rotation speed, and now increase the volume on that one, or the modulation amount. So that's already get the same kind of result, and it sounds like this. Let me deactivate this one real quick. Yeah, to spice it up a little bit, we can also kind of pan these oscillators a little bit to the left and the right. Yeah, depending on the volumes of the individual oscillators, this will then now kind of tend to lean more to the left or the right. And let's add some delay. Maybe make something like a pad out of it. And turn this one on. Make this one a bit slower. Just some random notes. So now that we have this construct, we are not obliged to use it on wavetable oscillators. I mean, you can use a sampler, which is playing back samples in a loop or in every which way. You can mix it. You can have wavetable oscillator samples, and even sidechain audio in, right? You can use 4 audio channels and group them, and then use them here as sidechain and rotate between them while they're playing back audio files. Or what I did before, what I showed you in the intro, is we can take this and just assign these modulators. I have here a stack of 4 serums, and I just picked a random pad for each of them, and then modulated the volume with those 4 modulators, as you can see. And yeah, that resulted in what you heard at the beginning. You can of course use as many and as all kind of different synths. So this wraps it up for now. I think the tutorial is probably long enough. In the second one, which I will probably do in a week or so, or during next week, we make some more complex shapes, like, crossing, like a lying 8, or even more complex, something that looks a bit more what we have here. I mean, probably not quite as elaborate, but in that directions, because, it influences the sound, and gives you just more possibilities and more interesting results. So I hope you liked this tutorial. I think this opens up a huge playground, especially when you look at this just as a new modulator that you now have at your disposal. It's basically, I would say, a 2-dimensional LFO, which you can apply to everything in Bitwig. It is full range. It reaches from 0 to 32 kilohertz, which gives you probably the fastest rotator in the world. So let me know what you think about it in the comments. Subscribe if you find the channel valuable, and see you next time.